The following message is a public service announcement brought to you in part by Tuck Davion.
Tell him I don't read all that shit.
Tuck Davion is not interested in your long-winded complaints.
Tell him I said that's for suckers.
He says that's only for government work, and he knows what he's doing.
Tell him I'm my own target audience.
Tuck Davion is his own target audience.
Tell him I'll make whatever the hell I want.
The only show Tuck is interested in making is the one he's interested in watching.
Tell him I said I ain't losing sleep.
If you don't like that, then you can make your own damn show where you do all the fucking work. Then you can do it however the hell you want.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Yeah, the Banshee doesn't suck.
I disagree.
I've been playing BattleTech for a lifetime, and it's my passion to bring the tabletop experience to as many people as I possibly can. I want to keep having great games with you. I'm Tuck Davion, and together with a talented group of freelancers and dedicated fans, we're out on the open road, searching the country for players with guts who'll join us and feel the DECA one more time on Battlebound.
Devil and Stone's Republic of the Sphere has been unceremoniously ground into the dirt under the boots of clans Wolf and Jade Falcon on Terra. Their combined might has stomped out multiple pockets of Stone's forces, with sweeping military actions across every inch of humanity's homeworld. Now, with their last barrier finally out of the way, the two ancient enemies turn their attention to one another on the continent of North America. Warriors sweating fealty to either Clan Wolf's Alaric Ward or the crazed Malvina Hazen of Clan Jade Falcon, prepared to square up to their place in history. Their actions over the centuries have led them here, to the battle these warriors have been waiting a lifetime for. Generations of their gene parents' lives were spent in the tireless pursuit of the same goal, the goal hammered into all Clan Warrior hopefuls from birth, to retake the shining jewel, Terra. On one side, the Wolves were the self-proclaimed children of Kerensky. On the other, the Jade Falcons had crowned themselves as his chosen. For the Wolves, the Warden ethos was handed down from the Great Father himself, their vision of protection lifted from the journals of Nicholas Kerensky.
To ward the inner sphere from all outside forces, until that time when the Star League is reborn.
The Falcons, however, see themselves as conquerors, crusaders needing to save the inner sphere from itself. The opposing philosophies between the two left them bitter rivals for generations, with their respective exploits becoming the stuff of legend within the clan's culture. Two commanders now prepare to meet on one of the final fields of battle.
Zella Brigand will be strictly enforced. The following special rules are in effect. Failure to follow these rules will result in an immediate forfeiture of the trial.
kind of mess Tuck has got himself into this time. Our initial matchup's a Mongrel Alpha versus Hierofalcon Bravo. Similar in speed and armor. One's a long-range build, the other is a short-range brawler though, and in this terrain, I have to give the win to the Hierofalcon. Next up's a Timberwolf Alpha versus a Jade Hawk. While the Jade Hawk is an absolute speedy brawler, the Timberwolf's Alpha's pinpoint damage, especially from those ERPBCs, I think will be enough to pull the day. So I give the win to the Timberwolf. Third, we have a Gargoyle Alpha versus a Thor-2 Charlie. On this, much as I love the Gargoyle, that Ultra Autocannon 20 I think says it all. Win. 4-2. Next up's our Blood Asp Alpha versus a Turd King. Bravo. Again, we're disco boats, total energy weapons, but the targeting computer and pinpoint damage of the Blood Asp simply is going to overwhelm the Turkina, I believe. Final battle, we're talking a Direwolf Alpha versus a Shrike 3, and I think the Direwolf wins going away. Its weaponry are ice cold. Tuck will be able to fight the whole time drinking his iced tea without its ice melting, whereas the Shrike can't even fire all its weapons together, so I find them redundant, and that negates any advantage of the targeting computer. But it's going to win. It'll be more of a slog, but I don't think the Shrike will even come close to crippling the Direwolf. So I'm giving the Direwolf the win and just absolute runaway battle on that. So that would leave the Blood Asp, Direwolf, and Timberwolf facing off against the Hierofalcon and the Thor 2C. At that point, I think just sheer mass and numbers will bring this particular Paws versus Claws in the favor of the Dog Pound.
Ancient foes have crossed oceans of time to find themselves at their last battlefield. The Wolves' commander carried with him the confidence and courage of the Warden's convictions, while their antagonists on the other side of the battlefield loomed large. Bloodthirsty Jade Falcon warriors strode their way onto the field with a menacing gait, and their claws were eager to rend the fur from the flesh of their enemies. The wolves would do what they had to do. Birds are at home in a cage. Pack leaders tend to fight their way out. As the wolves cautiously advanced, the Jade Falcons were in the superior tactical position. All the Wolf Commander could do was bring his forces ever closer to the thrumming power station that lay before them, while the Falcon warriors had only to wait for their enemy's advance. The Wolves would have to do some navigation, and there was no guarantee that they would be able to overcome the Falcon resistance in the time that it would take them to vector themselves into a more advantageous position. The day's first Batchall orders were thrown down, as pilots inside the Mongrel and Jadehawk challenged those inside the Hierofalcon and Timberwolf. These respective challenges were accepted, locking in the duels for 4 of the 10 pilots.
A distinct lack of line of sight prevented the issuance of others, but despite this advantage, the situation presented a challenge to the Falcon commander. Could she keep her warriors in check for long enough to lead the wolves to the slaughter? The game was afoot.
Gunfire was right around the corner. Warriors on both sides had already begun demanding duels, and it likely wouldn't be much longer until the rest of the field was cuffed up as well. While the Falcons slowly advanced, The most deadly of the wolves had set themselves into a northern attack vector to split enemy attention, watching the now enraged Falcon pilot inside the Hierofalcon make a blitz toward their comrade's mongrel. The pilot therein thumbed the trigger release for his long-range missiles. He didn't have to do anything extra to get as much action as he wanted. The south-southwest attack vectors would be taken by the majority of Team Claws, as more and more of the Falcons were beginning to maneuver their various ways off of the mountain. While their force projection may have seemed strong in one place, the Wolves' commander was already in the middle of providing wider coverage to the field as a whole. Together with the insane firepower the Blood Asp could bring to bear, the pair knew this action would take them a while to execute. This didn't concern the two, as they were determined to do things their way nonetheless. The Falcons controlled the southeast as they moved west, and if the Wolves were going to break in, they were going to have to do it through brute force. Despite not having tone, the pilot inside the mongrel let 30 long-range missiles fly as a warning shot to his enemy. The warheads screamed past their intended target, exploding all across the soil and kicking up large amounts of earth as they did. The pilot couldn't respond with the Hierofalcon's weapons just yet, but she resolved that the cur inside the mongrel would not get the best of her for long. The wolves were waiting for their adversaries to finally leave the nest, and as the massive Turkina lumbered its way forward, they were nearing the completion of that goal. At this, the wolf commander decided that now was the time to load the trap as the pilot of the Blood Asp leapt his grotesque machine into cover behind a nearby patch of woods. With his foe now in plain view, he called out the day's next Batchall against the pilot of the Turkina. This was accepted with no issue, which left a duel between the Wolf and Falcon commanders a foregone conclusion. With everything being locked in, this seemed to be the green light for the Falcons to finally let their Crusader blood flow. The duel between the warriors of the Mongrel and Hierofalcon continued to play out as it thus far had, with the Mongrel pilot now trying to draw a more serious bead on his enemy. The Wolves would take the route of counter-strategy, and as each Falcon plowed their way forward, the Wolves would vector away or reverse momentum. The pilots inside the Thor and Jadehawk wanted the pink mist, but the Wolves felt more even-keeled. The Timberwolf and Gargoyle pilots were either preparing to blow past their target and force them to pivot, or were drawing their enemy in closer for the coup de grace. The Wolf commander wasn't in a hurry to get the Shrike under his gun sights. He knew he had to buy time for his warriors to put some heat on the Falcons first. If only his wolves could give the birds a black eye, perhaps their commander would then be shaken by the time their duel came to pass. The Falcons paid a price for their fervor, as the wolves opened up the first serious exchange between the two. Particle cannons screamed across the battlefield from the massive barrels of both the Blood Asp and the Gargoyle, each slagging nearly a full ton of armor away from their respective targets. While their enemies' startled return reports came up dry, the Mongrel pilot struck pay dirt with LRM fire despite the Hierofalcon's great speed. As the Hierofalcon faltered, other duelists hit nothing but air. The clock was ticking, and the Falcon commander's rage was building.
She still could not see her enemy, and she had the distinct feeling she was being toyed with. And the Falcon Commander was not one to be toyed with. Through sheer intestinal fortitude, she found herself willing her enemy to appear, and appear he did. The Wolves' commander burst through the trees and out into plain view, which was all she wanted to see from the command couch of her Shrike. She lit her jump jets with fuel from the fires of hell itself and sailed toward her enemy, her weapons bristling with chaotic energy as she prepared to carve out her satisfaction across the direwolf's torso. As the Falcon Commander pressed doubtlessly forward, this action emboldened the rest of her team, who all began to press against the wolves, hoping to collapse them under the weight. The wolves, however, stuck to their guns and their defensive tactics, with Falcons inside the Thor and Hyro Falcon bearing down on their respective enemies. The wolves calmly backpedaled. They knew the Falcons would keep advancing no matter what, so they took the time to line their shots up instead of panicking. The middle of the battlefield was sizing up to look like a meat grinder, as hundreds of tons of metal and Myanmar moved about the power station, the outcome of each dance seemingly deadlier than the one preceding it. While warriors inside the Timberwolf and Gargoyle prepared to deal with the Falcon's bloodlust, only the Wolf Commander and his pilot inside the Blood Asp had made their way forward, looking to keep the attention of their largest foes occupied while the remaining wolves went to work on the others. Reaching out with his machine's particle cannons, the Gargoyle pilot sent white-hot man-made lightning screeching its death song across the battlefield. It struck his enemy right between the eyes, turning the lights out inside the Thor indefinitely, leaving it cold and unmoving as it crashed to the dirt.
Mech destroyed.
Despite his enemy having been obliterated, the Gargoyle pilot was knocked clean off his feet by pulse laser fire from the Thor due to the Falcon warrior being faster on the draw. He clenched his jaw as he went down, but survived any life-threatening injury upon impact. The savagery of this attack shocked the Falcons. The sudden loss of their comrade caused some of the Falcons' duels to go poorly, as each respective enemy continued to harass them with incoming fire that would ultimately go unanswered. Neither of the warriors inside the Hyro Falcon or Jadehawk could find firing solutions for their short-range missiles, streak or otherwise, and the Blood Asp was still outgunning his enemy as the two tore into one another with particle cannons and laser fire. The Falcon Commander, however, was vicious, and the attack was powerful enough to throw off all of the Wolf Commander's return fire. He threw himself into the positions necessary to keep his machine upright, and was left with blurry vision as a burst of missiles exploded dangerously close to his cockpit. He knew the Falcon Commander was only just getting started, and he steeled himself for what he was sure was coming next. The wolves remained unshaken, and the warrior inside the Gargoyle slowly rose to his feet, albeit with some difficulty. The pressure was now on the Falcons to even up the score as fast as they could if they wanted to stay in the action long enough to emerge victorious. The wolves, however, knew the real advantage was theirs. Pilots, now enraged beyond what was already an abnormal volume, closed in on their enemies as fast as their machines would take them. Further infuriating the Falcon warriors was the Warden's resolve to continue their current course of action, with pilots inside the Mongrel and Timberwolf continuing to plod their machines steadily backwards while their enemies approached. The Falcons knew their enemy couldn't run forever. They'd eventually run out of room. While they tried to stop the oncoming train that was the Falcon offensive, the Wolves' commander had a different engine of his own to deal with. Having given up all reservation, the Falcon commander was upon him, and there was nowhere for him to go. As he powered forward, he knew there was no getting around it. He'd simply have to weather the storm and hope he gave as good as he got. There was some good news, however. The Wolves had finally managed to convince the last of the Falcons to enter the circle completely, and with the competitors now all on an equal playing field, the pilot inside the Blood Asp was preparing to go DACA. This time, the Mongrel's missiles tore the Hyro Falcon open like a soup can, leaving thick smoke billowing from a jagged gash in the Mech's torso, sparks flying out from the exposed internal structure. The blast threw off the pilot's aim for the return, and none of the Hyro Falcon's missiles landed against the Mongrel. However, the Wolves' win streak would end there. The Jadehawk's pilot unleashed a furious barrage of missile and laser fire, keeping his enemy inside the Timberwolf pinned down, while the warrior inside the Turkina had blown the faceplate clean off the Blood Asp. The massive machine's sensors and life support systems had suffered critical damage as the result of laser fire, nearly incinerating the pilot as it wrecked everything around him. His survival was a wonder by itself, but the fact the pilot managed to connect with a particle cannon blast against his enemy was nothing short of a miracle. And the Wolves' woes wouldn't end there. The Falcon commander, hungry for the destruction of her enemies, turned her cockpit into a sauna as she bowled the Wolf commander over, striking him down with the ease of the Falcon stalking its prey. Her machined particle cannons and large-caliber laser tore the powerful assault mech asunder as she absorbed his return fire, shrugging it off like so much flotsam and jetsam on the evening sea. The Wolf commander was in a bind.
Turn pits and cages, let loose and bit the neighbors, wrist to razors. Y'all don't want war, y'all want talk. In the dark, my dogs all bark like roof. Get your whole roof caved in like reindeer hoofs. Stomp the booth, shake the floor tiles loose. The more y'all breach, the more I lose.
The Wolf commander was not, however, deterred. The Falcon warriors were beginning their descent to swoop in on what looked to be an enemy force in disarray, with the Turkina pilot lining up the shot with cold, unfeeling precision. The Wolf commander's order came down the line firm. Hold your ground. Continuing their push as he guessed they may have, the Wolves soon found themselves being chased down by various Falcon warriors who were looking to keep the enemy on their back feet. While his comrades backpedaled and continued to fight the tidal wave of destruction moving toward them, the Wolves' commander stood to his feet to face his enemy. He felt like he still stood a fighting chance, but across the battlefield, the Jadehawk and its bevy of streaked short-range missiles loomed like a specter over the warrior inside the Timberwolf. The only real good news to be had was that the Mongrel and its pilot still possessed a significant advantage over his opponent. Despite being pushed back against the wall, the Wolves lashed out in a gnashing of teeth that the Falcons were wholly unprepared for. Blasting away at their enemies, the Jadehawk and Hyro Falcon were covered in punishing fire. The smaller of the two left the exchange bleeding heat out of a crack in her engine, whereas her larger cousin could not find a firing solution for more than half of his missile bays. The Wolves, riding high, continued to stack wins from there, as even the warrior inside the Blood Asp managed to overcome his machine's damaged sensors, deleting close to 3 tons of armor from the Turkina bearing down on him. His foe's aim was ruined by this act of sheer fortitude. Being forced to throttle back on her weapons fire to cool down, the Falcon Commander was shown the business end of her enemy's gun barrels. Her machine dutifully absorbed this punishment yet again, but this time only under heavy protest. However, that was not a situation that could repeat itself ad nauseum. The wolves were nearing the entrance of a possible comeback, and the Falcon Commander was looking to put these wretched dogs on the other side of her guns away for good. The avatars of ancient enemies twisted and turned, some standing fast and challenging their foe to a duel in the spot where each of them stood. The Wolf Commander would give the enemy what they wanted, but on his terms, as he was nowhere near in the dire straits that it may have seemed to the enemy. This had to be timed just right, or else any momentum he had left against the Falcons would surely slip away. The battlefield was a powder keg at the end of its fuse, as half of the remaining warriors drew their targeting reticles down on their opponents with the intention of triggering alpha strikes. The pilots inside the Timberwolf and Jadehawk continued to wail on each other, with 3 of the Jadehawk's 4 Streak SRM bays finally finding firing solutions. Now try to say that 5 times fast, kids. The real carnage was on full display, however, where the big iron brawlers of the grid were at play. The destruction of the Hierofalcon went almost unnoticed amidst the chaos now unfolding near the power station. The Wolf Commander could now claim the upper hand against his foe, but the victory was bittersweet. To the south, the warrior inside the Turkina had knocked the blood-ass clean off its feet, its warrior's vitals spiking, a clear sign of cranial distress. The Falcons were now down 2, but even that victory could yet prove Pyrrhic. The Falcons, for their part, were not out of the fight yet.
Thus began the Showcase Showdown.
The Wolf Commander was unrelenting, and with his fearsome machine now at full firing capacity, there was no longer any holding back. The warriors who had finished their duels looked on as their commander continued to blast tomato can-sized holes into the Shrike, the Falcon Commander only barely making her way to a vertical base from which to offer return fire. The smaller of the pair wouldn't be on her feet long, though, as all her focus was devoted to deleting the Wolf Commander, not remaining upright. She came down with a sickening thud and was immediately unconscious as soon as her machine hit the ground. The Jadehawk warrior's missiles continued to power their way through the Timberwolf's defenses, but his enemy was not dispatched so easily. The 2 pilots slapped each other over in a near double KO, with the warrior inside the Jadehawk having a much worse go of things. Neural feedback from an ammunition explosion had sent him spiraling into the ether, joining his beleaguered commander in unconsciousness. The Blood-Asp pilot shook off the cobwebs as reality began to slowly sink back into his field of view, and he looked around to assess his situation. There was still fight left in this jangling automaton, and today was a good day to die. With the Falcon Commander and one of her 2 remaining pilots out cold, the warrior inside the Blood Asp dug his heels in to give the Turkina the blast that would send it back to hell. Simultaneously, his enemy pulled the trigger. The 2 massive war machines locked up with everything they had, and with an insane display of wanton violence, the 2 warriors cleaved their way through the cockpit of their respective enemies with particle cannon or laser fire. The pair had achieved what all clan warriors could ever hope: to die with honor in the battle for Terra itself. The Warden Commander surveyed the death and devastation before him. Terra had seen enough. When the remaining Falcon warriors awoke, he would strongly recommend that they step down and avoid further black marks on their respective codices, or worse.
Alright, Battletech fans, it's after the action time. You know how it is. You know how we do. Really? What a season finale this was. What a game. Oh, I'm having a moment. What a game this was.
I've never seen some of these rolls happen. Like, just the way that it finished out. We were going for brutality,
and that's what we
found
it. You know, and God, that last turn, just I hit you with that PPC in the face, right? I'm like, yeah, all right, cool. All I gotta do is live. That's it. And you're like, ERLRs? Oh.
My Turkina was not going out without taking somebody with it.
Like that. And just, yeah, blasted him. And so that leaves us with the Shrike, who is just thoroughly concussed. Two hits away from death on the pilot hit chart. And, you know, the Jadehawk pilot he's awake, but
it ended up like a slumber party. I've never seen this many unconscious pilots on the table at the same time.
It's like Mech Warrior Slumber Party Part 2.
I mean, I had 2 guys on the ground. You were 2 up as far as the number of mechs on the table.
Sure.
So I think by the end it was definitely, you know, a clear victory on your part.
What I was just telling you, and I'll tell the folks at home now, is the way I looked at it is whatever happened in the duel between the Timberwolf and the Jadehawk, let's just say best case scenario, the Jadehawk beats that guy. Okay, but he's going to be softened up after that fight, and then he's going to have to take on either the Grendel, who's completely fresh, or he's going to have to take on the Gargoyle, who basically had flesh wounds at that point. That damage ain't worth writing home about. And I feel like even in the best case scenario, if that were to happen, he'd still have to face those other 2, and one of those 2 would end up getting him. And the Direwolf was hurting for certain. Let me just not make any bones about that. He was hurting. But I feel like going up against the Shrike, the Direwolf would win the war of attrition. Do you agree with that?
I agree. Yeah, I mean, by the end of the game, there was basically no armor left on the Shrike. You had all sorts of crits happening in the one leg. He was, we were at a 10 plus just to wake up.
Sure.
He wasn't getting back in.
Yeah, and he'd be so concussed at that point. And I looked at it like, okay, so taking that Thor out early game, that was a huge advantage because it left me with the Gargoyle as an initiative sink. Mm-hmm. And that was just, I can move him and then watch somebody else move before I have to move one of my guys. Now, I forgot to do it on turn 6, and so going into turn 7, I'm sitting here going, I gotta not forget that stuff again. And I'm looking at it going, I need to make one more kill for this game to really start to move in my direction. But it can't be it has to be one of the big guys. It has to be either that Turkina or it has to be the Shrike. One of them gotta go, because the way I looked at it is, well, if I lose let's say I lose the Blood Asp, right? Okay. Then I have to win the duel against the Shrike for the Direwolf to come over and finish him off. That'd be the only way I could catch up. And I'm looking at it going, this just doesn't, the Direwolf's hurting, I gotta get through this. And so I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe the gargoyle can finish one of these guys off. Worst case, if I lose both duels, I'd have to finish one off, and then I could use the Grendel to hopefully finish the other one off. I mean, I was behind the 8 ball in all of the scenarios that I was cooking up in my head. Yeah.
I'm so surprised.
I was like, but what I said at the end was, if I get lucky. And that's what happened. I got lucky. And there were several shots that you pulled that were hitting fresh armor, and I'm going, ugh, like anything but these other places. I will accept anything but the legs, or I'll accept anything but the left torso, or whatever it was. And that's what was winding up happening. So I was walking back into this fight, turn 7. I'm not beat, but I'm worried about it. Like, I'm just like, I gotta be on my shit. So how did you feel about it?
So even more than losing the Thor, I was watching how the placement that you were using, especially with the Grendel, was just phenomenal. You were keeping me outside of the SRM ranges with that and the Timberwolf. I was sweating. Like, as a less experienced player for sure, I felt like I was just trying to keep up.
Right.
Which literally was the case with the Grendel, because you're moving, that's a 7-11-7.
7-11-7, yeah.
And I'm struggling. I think my jump was an 8 with the Hyro Falcon, but I didn't run nearly as fast. And trying to angle in such a way, because losing that Thor early on hurt me in the initiative order every single time. So you were getting a chance to react to every single placement that I made, and you were just hitting these the sweet spots perfectly for you, and then keeping me outside of range to be effective. I was having to roll 11s and boxcars with those SRMs, so it was nasty.
And I knew going into it that I would have the range advantage on the Timberwolf, and I would have the range advantage on the Grendel if the Batchall orders went the way I wanted them to. And I don't mind telling you, I play tested this game once before I came out here, because games that are big, I'm like, I want to know how this shakes out. Yeah. What do I have to do when I get there? And I felt like the lesson that I took away from that is the Timberwolf and the Grendel, if they get the orders that they want, have to stay at range. Now, the Timberwolf going up against the Jade Hawk, that wasn't my original plan, actually. Really? My original plan was the Gargoyle.
Yeah, I remember you being like, whoa, how do you want to do it?
Yeah, because my original plan was the Gargoyle against the Jade Hawk.
Really?
And it still won that fight, but... So you threw me a curveball there. I was like, that's okay.
Because I mean, the Gargoyle's got some real mobility too.
Yeah,
like I saw when he was coming up the board like that, he was covering the distance pretty quickly.
And so I said, that's okay. I can handle that. Most of this stuff is short range, but you had a good strategy going into that industrial plant. You had me boxed in a couple of times. I could only barely weasel my way out of it, and I wasn't getting 2 defenses. I was getting 1 defense.
It's been a good 20 years since I was on the chess team, so I was trying to position where he just couldn't, get far enough away from me to have that range advantage come into play again. But again, with the initiative the way it was, and me down in Mech, it was just me trying to keep up the whole time.
And you definitely threw me for a loop with the Eel Clan stuff, because I'll tell you folks right now, 3070 is about where I cut it. I'm just like, I'm happy with everything before that. And I've gone as far as 3085, I believe that's the Jihad era, or the Dark Age or whatever. I've done it, and it's not terrible, it's whatever, but I usually just, this is my thing, and I'm perfectly happy to do that. But you threw this on the table, and I'm looking at these things going, what? I've never seen these things. And you got an assault mech jumping 5, other things jumping like 8. I'm just, during the play test, I couldn't hit these things for nothing. I couldn't hit I'm like, I gotta get lucky because I can't shoot them. And I was completely unfamiliar with the Turkina. I knew that was the only thing on the list I felt comfortable with, because I'm like, I know that one. I know what it does. It's crazy. But the other ones, I'm like, I'm not so sure. And so I had to do like a metric crap ton of like research on these guys to be like, okay, let me look at this. Let me analyze this. Let me think about it, because it was just completely out of my wheelhouse. So thank you for challenging me. That's what I'm saying. Thank you for giving me something that's like.
Even then, you brought all the alpha variants, and and when I first looked at it, I was like, oh, this is all the classic stuff. But then I showed it to some of my more experienced friends, and they're like, oh, you better be careful.
It's just what I knew.
That blood ass Blood Asp was no joke. The Dire Wolf, all of you guys had really heavy impacts on the gameplay, so it was really cool.
The one thing that I noticed, and after I took out the Thor, this was not relevant anymore, but I think it was turn 4, there was a time you moved the Hierofalcon. When you had the initiative, you moved it before I moved the Grendel.
Yeah, I saw that.
And I was just like, okay, so change of plan.
Yep.
And I know you remember me saying, wait a minute, change of plan. I'm gonna do something else now. And thanks, Ray. Ray Garner knows that gimmick. And so I was just like, I'm gonna change it. But after turn 4, it didn't matter because the Thor went down, and I feel like you didn't really do anything wrong past that. There were so many times we both just stood there and went, and what else are you gonna do? Well, some of these mechs have movement profiles that are as slow as molasses, you know, and 3-5, where are you gonna go? And you're just gonna play. And I think that the only advantage that I had in the Blood Asp versus the Turkina is I can do more damage before heat starts to become a problem. And
I noticed that because like my Shrike was having to really pick and choose which weapons it shot, and as I'm jumping up trying to close the distance, I'm using those jump jets, which is really holding me back on what I can send down the way at too.
My original Batchall order was based on damage. It was like, okay, well, if I take the Blood Asp versus the Turkina, how much damage can I expect on average to get shot with if everything hits? And I did that calculation, and I said, now if my preferred shots hit, how much am I doing? And I was ahead of the curve in that one. It was the same thing with the Dire Wolf. I was like, the Shrike has to really pick and choose what it wants to fire, otherwise, heat. The Dire Wolf, don't care. It's everything. It could just do it all day. And so I was like, I'll take that over this, no problem. And that's why I wanted that fight and that fight to happen the way they did.
And it's so cool to see that level of play where, like, even before the battle, you're going in knowing what to expect as far as how much damage needs to come out and how much you're going to receive. Like, that's... I want to get that way too. Like every time I fight someone who's more experienced, I try and take away as much as possible. And I'm definitely gonna, consider the stuff that happened in this game the next time around where I'm playing someone local.
So the next thing I want to talk about is this amazing terrain that you put together for this game. Folks, I had very little to do with the terrain in this game. It was just some hills and a couple of things from Death Ray Designs. But, I mean, you went all out. So tell me about that.
Well, I gotta say, first off, the Death Ray Design stuff, that cool reactor thing was just awesome. And just seeing that on the table, towering over the mechs, really kind of kept stuff in perspective too. But I ended up, I went to Aries Games and got just a ton of the Hextech terrain, which, normally we've played on the paper maps, and it's been really cool. I love a lot of these maps, but it's all been flat. So now that I've started into getting this 3D terrain, I just want more of it. Like I want to cover the whole table in this really cool stuff because there's so much cool stuff out there. Yeah.
Let me put these guys over here at this shop. They got the Mega Mat, y'all. They got the BFM, and they're doing this big Solaris tournament right now, and I just keep poking my head over there every so often, and it looks dope. Like, I totally want to come and take part of this, even if it's two-dimensional terrain. I ain't too good for that. That's what I grew up on, so I'm good with it. But I want to keep it on your art for just a little bit longer, because you just knocked this out of the park. I mean, we had the mushroom forests. We had, what is that, like a giant power plant or something?
Yeah, the pump station.
Pump station. Okay, see, after a certain point, I stopped looking at things, because I'm like, I have what I need. I'm not worried about it. So I'd never seen anything like that, but you painted inside the little windows, and you had like gradient colors, and I'm just sitting here going, that is one of the coolest battlefields that I've had here on the show, and for the season finale, I mean, how could you ask for more than that? And so the thing I really love about the Mushroom Forest is, yes, this is the battle for Terra. This is on Earth in the Canadian forest, but it's the 32nd century or whatever. 32nd century. Who knows what kind of flora and fauna is growing on planet Earth? However many 100 years in the future. There is literally BattleTech, and this is one of the things I love about BattleTech. It is your sandbox.
Yeah.
You can, within that sandbox, within reason, you can do almost anything that you want.
There's a whole galaxy you can play with.
So the fact that you put all this together, how long did this take you?
Oh man, this was you came to me about, what was it, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah. No, I want to say 3. Wasn't it 3? 3 weeks.
So
she had 3 weeks notice.
I had to order the stuff and get it in, and then I had about 2 weeks to just non-stop. I was painting all day.
Yeah, I was gonna say, didn't you say you were like staying up late nights, just
Oh yeah, late nights, even into this morning. I was putting the last little finishing touches on the paint jobs. But it was, I mean, this is what I love to do, and if I can't be the best tactician, at least I've got some painting skills.
At least you got the prettiest miniatures on board. So thank you for doing that, because that was an amazing battlefield.
Like I said before, this is a full circle experience for me. I'm so glad that you got to come here.
Yes.
Like you were there at the very beginning of my miniature painting, the Rally's Mech Hangar customs. You got me started, and now a year later, I think it is.
Yeah, I got it. Went by like that, didn't it?
I know, it's just like, I can't even imagine. But now here we are getting to face off on the battlefield, and it was just so cool. This is awesome. I mean, as far as, being at this level of play, it was really fun. It was really cool to get to, be across the table from you. So I'm happy all the way around.
Thank you so much.
Very much.
Battletech fans, that concludes the Season 3 finale right here on Battlebound. The season that was never supposed to happen, Daddy. And what a season finale it was. Folks, if you like what you've seen so far, do us a big favor. Hit that subscribe bell down there. Turn on all notifications so you can find out exactly where Battlebound is going to turn up next. We've had a great time out here at Game Night in St. Louis, Missouri with our featured player, Rally. And we've got all the guys from the crew here at Game Night. They're doing the Battletech thing. Where are we going to see you next time, folks? We're going to see you on Battlebound!
Mr. Davian, you're a hard man to find.
Really? I would have imagined that anybody that had anything they needed to say to me knew where to find me.
I was just trying to be polite.
Okay.
I'd like to speak with you about the Arc City Avengers initiative.
Okay. Talk.
Be sure to smash our like button and subscribe to our channel.
Crowdfunding is when lots of people give you small amounts of money to help your passion project come to life.